So this is Use My Data. The strapline we've started to use in the past couple of years is a trusted voice in patient data, which actually describes, as I hope you'll see, quite well what it is what we are and what we do. Oops, too quick. So my role within Use My Data as part of a very small secretariat is as data advisor. So that reflects that I've worked for sort of 30 or 40 years in and around health data in a wide range of different jobs. All I do these days is sit in that tricky space between patients and data specialists, analysts, researchers to try and bridge some of those gaps and debunk some of the things and try and equip our members with more information, knowledge and support for them to do a more active job. That's my part of the secretariat. I'll come back to the secretariat shortly. So first of all, briefly, where we came from. So Use My Data started, the inception was back in 2015. It was a conference by the National Cancer Intelligence Network, which I used to run. It was in Belfast that year. We got 600 people, 100 of those were patients. We had a really good, strong involvement of patients across everything we did at that point. And this was a time when data access for research was drying up, had dried up in many cases. And when the patients in the audience heard this, they were somewhat disgruntled. I'll use my language carefully because we're recording. And we got the bulk of the patients together with some of the charities who were at that meeting over a lunchtime session and said, do you want to do something about this? Can we actually help give you a stronger voice? And that's actually where Use My Data came from. Patients hearing something that their data wasn't being used and wanting to do something about it. It started from a cancer perspective, the Cancer Intelligence Network, but it's actually widened a while ago now to all disease areas with a full UK focus. And we have members and associates. I'll tell you what they are in a second. About what it is and what we do, essentially it's an advocacy and practical movement of patients, relatives and carers. The advocacy side is around promoting responsible, accountable use of data, working with organisations who use data, helping them do the right thing, particularly highlighting the benefits. So one thing we can do as members, groups of patients, is use our voices to begin to explain benefits of using patient data. So ideally, when there's a data story in the media, rather than the media going to a privacy lobby group, they might actually come to a patient group. And we're still working hard to try and make that happen. That's a tough nut to crack, but that's why we want to use the patient voices. There are some clear things around, as you would expect, the need for lobbying for robust and transparent safeguarding, but particularly use of data. One of the frustrations that our members have is that there seems to be an increasing focus on the safeguarding side and a decreasing focus on the usage side. And we've seen that in recent literature that we've seen because we got on various different groups about data access generally seems to be slowing up for researchers rather than speeding up. And that is not in the interest of patients. And that's one of the things we consistently and constantly trying to push against. One thing we try and do is to provide that balance. I mentioned the privacy lobbyists who tend to get in the media quite quickly. What we try and do is to provide that balance as that trusted voice in patient data to bring our voices to the fore much more strongly. The other thing we do, which might be interest to you, and I'll come back to this, is this role we play as critical friends. So lots of organizations, lots of groups have difficult conversations around data, with what data they're going to be using, collecting, and a whole range of different tricky conversations. And we've, over the past few years, developed this process of critical friends. So organizations will come to us, say, can we have a conversation with some of your members, either open or in confidence, about a topic, an idea, a theme, a problem. And because we've put a lot of emphasis into equipping our members with more detailed information about the data world, it's an easy place for organizations to come to, and we develop that demonstrable trust that they can have in us, that we'll have this conversation with them in confidence if needs be. We'll give them the voices of our patients back, which will probably give a range of views. To help them do that, we build a whole set, so we really try and build up our members' knowledge and experience of data stuff. It's really tough for patients who get involved in PPIE to find out more about the data stuff. But what we do is, as you'll see, we play a really active role in furnishing them with more information, more knowledge, more background in terms of a whole range of data topics, so they can be more active in all the meetings they take part in groups such as this and other groups. In terms of governance of funding, we often get asked who pays for all this stuff. First of all, we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we've got a charity application that's currently in progress. We've had various hosts in the past, usually academic groups, who've been kind enough to host some of our people, including me, including the University of Leeds most recently. But we're a completely separate not-for-profit company. We're soon to be a charity. We have members and associate members. I mentioned members already. The members are patient advocates, patients, relatives, and carers with an interest in data. Associate members are others, clinicians, researchers, charity workers. You can see there anybody outside that patient, relative, and carer domain who has an interest in data and wants to work collectively to try and push the agendas forward. We run with a small executive group. 9 of our members are the executive group. We advertise across our membership to say who wants to be on that. The executive group essentially steers and decides what Use My Data does. And then the secretariat, 4 part-time roles, one of which is me, we do what the executive group say. So rather than in my old life being in charge of an organization, it's completely the opposite here. The executive group decide on behalf of the members what they want to do, and they instruct us to go away and do it. So I'm essentially working for them. It's quite a nice model. I mean, it just means we're entirely patient-led. Somebody comes to me with an idea. I don't say yes or no. I say I need to talk to the executive group, and they're the ones who will decide. And if needs be, they'll ask the rest of the members. In terms of funding, the current funding we've got, we get a 3-year grant from Cancer Research UK. We're a year and a bit into that now. We had a 1-year fund from NHS England. We've also had some previous money from HDR UK to supported us through a transition process, and they also help with in-kind. So they will give us meeting rooms at the Wellcome Trust in London for us to meet, which is really handy as well. So we put them on as a funder or a funder in kind as well. And that's it. Going back to what we are, because we are patients, relatives, and carers, the one thing we can do is to produce unique patient voices. Ask patients what they say, what they think. And right at the outset, we produce a whole range of these little case studies, which are printed. They're all on the website. And then we also did video recordings as well. What people think about data, what their frustrations are, what they'd like to see. And again, this doesn't change the world. It gives them a stronger voice. But we have seen these videos being used at the front of conferences. We've seen them being used in media settings. So they are used actively by various different people. They are free to use. You don't need to ask. You can use them. You can quote from them. You can take quotations from them. That's quite useful, however you think fit. And we're due to refresh those into next year as well. But it's about patients speaking about what they think about the value of their data and what they would like to happen. The other big thing, sort of stuff we do is around the advocacy side and trying to bring our voices, the patient voices, to decide what they think should be said and should be done. Here's some examples. If you look at the top left-hand one, the patient data citation, this was the first thing I think was done. Patients who were going to conferences and events would see academic posters, they'd see presentations, and where these things were using patient data, it never said that they were using patient data. And a couple of them said, wouldn't it be good if on the bottom of a poster, which has got all these statistics about patient data, whatever the topic, if they just said, we only could do this because we use patient data, and thank you. And that was picked up. It was quite a strong message because it was picked up by Understanding Patient Data, by HJK, by ONS, by Public Health England in the old days, NHS England now, by research funders. So you'll see these words appearing on lots and lots more academic publications and other publications, and some commercial organisations, data organisations, also now use this. This is a simple idea that came up from the patients that's now got thousands of use across the country. Does it solve the problem? No, but it demonstrates that none of these the piece of academic work, the publications that get done, can be done without patient data, and it begins to narrow the gap between the highly academic world and the patient world. Other examples, we run webinars. The webinars we run are all suggested by our members, so they all ask direct questions. The bottom left on, does the NHS sell my data? You can watch that again if you want the report we did against that. It's all on the web. But when we asked organisations, a large data organisation to come, they said, well, we don't really like the title, don't like to talk about selling data. Well, that wasn't the point. And it rather was the point, because we wanted to ask the question, do you sell data? And at the start of the webinar, we ran a poll, and most people said, well, we're not sure, or we don't know, or we don't think they do. At the end of the webinar, we did a poll, and the vast majority, 70% I think it was, said, yeah, the NHS does sell data. But, we're okay with that, because as long as we know what's been done with it, who's doing it, what the benefits are, that's where we'd rather like the focus, rather than getting hung up on words like sell. We've run other things as well. We run regular sessions. We've run things like artificial intelligence. We've got involved in lack of use of tissue samples because it was related to the data world, again, at the request of our members. And we've also got involved with commercial use of data. The one on the right-hand side was just a short extract from something we did with commercial users of data to try and get them to come and explain what it is they did, and then start that conversation with our members. And in the middle top, you've got one example of a call to action. This was called My Access to My Health Records. So when our members come up with things which are important to them, there are a few things we can do. We can produce calls to action, lobbying type statements, and we can also produce other documents, instructive type statements. And one thing we did early on was develop these transparency statements. These go back a while now, and these have been picked up by HJK quite early on and extended out. So whilst they may not read exactly for all organisations, this is where it came from. We sat down with some of the academics and with our members, and indeed with Understanding Patient Data we work with on this. And these were all written by patients that have been picked up and used widely. There's nothing surprising in there, but it just shows that if you ask people, have a sensible conversation with them and give them the background, they can come up with some really useful stuff, which is really patient-led, patient-driven. And I mentioned the rest of the call to actions and position statements we've got. Again, they're all on the web. You can click through. There's a whole range of different things on there, a variety of things. All on the website, all freely available, all open for you to look at and to use. I mentioned our members. We are completely different as an organisation. We put a huge amount of effort into equipping our members, the patients, relatives, and carers, with information they need to know for them to do a better PPIE job, simplistically. And this is a screenshot of some of the sessions that we've run, education sessions we've run. We run them once every 3-ish weeks. Sometimes it's a bit longer, sometimes shorter, on a range of topics. The bulk of the topic suggestions come from the members. Sometimes they come from me, and I'll ask somebody, would it be useful if we ran something on a particular topic? But there's a whole range of things in there. They take a similar format to today, 20 minutes talking about a topic, 40 minutes discussing. We always put the 20 minutes on the web as a recording for anybody to see. It's publicly available. Sometimes we put discussions on, depending on how detailed it gets, whether people are happy with that. And sometimes we have a transcript. But we always retain these. We're now building these up into a sort of a library. We're actually just in the process of repackaging some of these into a formal training program, if you like, which will be about 6 of these. And members can be able to book on those, and we'll run those probably spring next year. We'll start to run those. Well, I mentioned we run them fairly regularly. This is the next one we're doing, which is on 6th of December. It's about open source. Now, you may not think open source is of any interest to a PPIE member, but lots and lots of our members are coming across this term open source, and they really want to know what it was about. And that's what we do. So we put these sessions on to say, you've heard it, let's look at it, let's explain what it's about, have a discussion, and equip you with more information, more knowledge, so you can play a more active role. Just one example. In terms of our influence, I will run out of breath shortly. In terms of our influence, we've got formal places for our members. This is where organisations have come to us and said, could we have a formal Use My Data rep on a particular group or panel? These are some of them that I've listed up there. There are others, but it just gets too messy on the slides. But this is where the group has come to us and said, we want a formal Use My Data representative. And then we'll go through the process of getting them together and work with the group so they can contact the person directly, they become part of the group, and they report back to Use My Data as a formal member. There's a range of things there. We have other groups which come to us and say, can we have a Use My Data rep? And as I said before, all these questions go to our executive group, and sometimes the executive group, the 9 members, will say, actually, it's probably better if you, Chris, go on these group or somebody else go on the group. So they've asked me to go on certain groups on their behalf. So there's 4 of them, 5 of them rather. So I attend as a Use My Data rep, but representing their views. Normally we would have them on the groups rather than me, but sometimes they prefer me to go. And then there's a whole bunch of other groups which are outside of formal roles. So our members are on lots of these groups as Use My Data members, but not representing Use My Data formally, if you like. And again, there are, I think there's a couple of hundred of those now around the country. This is just a few which I snipped from more recent groups that people have been involved with, and organisations we've talked to, including tricky ones like Palantir, for instance. The other thing we do with our members, because we put a lot of effort into telling them what's going on and answering their questions as best we can, it's really useful, because when a consultation or something comes out asking for comments, we write out to all our members and say, this is out. If you'd like to provide a comment, please do so. They can send me an email, it could be a phone call, they can send me a fully written brief, whatever it is, large or small. And my job as the data advisor is to pull those things together and form a response from Use My Data. So whilst doing that, I don't write any words at all for that. I pull together themes and pull out the main themes, but all the words in there are directly quoted from the emails, the conversations, the write-ups that patients give me. So we don't invent anything. This is entirely patient-led and patient words. I just do the editing. And there's a range of those different things. At the moment, we're just doing one for the 10-year plan for the NHS. I was just doing some work on that this morning because another member sent me some extra thoughts in. The benefit of this is, it's patient voices. It's what patients have said. It's what members have said, because I don't edit the words. You also recognise that for each and every one of these, I guarantee you there will be different views in there, because one of the powers that we've got is not all our members think the same. They all want data to be used to drive the NHS and to drive research and help people. But beneath that, you get different perspectives. So some of our members have opted out because they want these things to happen, but until they're satisfied that there's enough transparency, enough openness, they're cautious. And what they want to do is to say, I've opted out, but I want to use my voice to make things better. So we do see in these things a range of views from our members to all these different consultations. I think that's a strength. Some people saw that as a weakness. I disagree. I think it's a real strength. So just briefly, there's only a few slides left before I ask you a few questions. The real benefits of being a Use My Data member. So if you've got any of your groups with PPIE members, they might benefit from being Use My Data member. It's completely free to join, free to take part, free to leave. Those were the words from one of our members, actually. I've reused those. It's been part of a community. So what we found is lots of our members, all of our members, I think, have been involved in other research groups, research programs, advisory boards, and the rest. And they find it quite isolating. So what Use My Data has done is to bring together that community of patients. So you get people who've worked in lots of different areas that can share their views. What we also do is put a regular update out to them. So we send out a weekly newsletter, which is all things about patient data. That could include reports that have come out, comments that have come out, blogs that have come out, things that are in the media. It could include opportunities for members to get involved in certain research programs who are looking for volunteer PPI members. It could be asking people for their voices to be heard around things like consultations, as I've said. So it could be a range of different things. It could be advertising sessions like this and other sessions, which we do very regularly. The other benefit is it gives people a voice to be heard. We know that if an individual responds to something, that's only one voice. But what we've managed to do is to produce a collective, collated voice, even though all the voices aren't saying exactly the same thing. There's a real strength, though, in having that strength of numbers, if you like, of patients, members responding to things and being involved. I've mentioned the educational sessions. The members get exclusive access to those. So those are just the benefit of being a member, but we put the recordings out for anybody to watch afterwards. But to be to be there live, listening to things as it's been said, and then being involved in the conversation, the Q&A, you need to be part of a member. We give priority access to members for our public events, but all our public events are there afterwards open to the public as well. They also get personal guidance, which sounds like a mad thing to say, but it's something we've worked quite hard on from the start. So any of them have got my phone number on my email, and they've got the same thing for Alison as the coordinator for Use My Data. And at any point in time, if they're stuck in a meeting, if they hear something, if they're on a train, something comes up, they don't know, they will text or email or ring to say, can you just have a word about this? And we'll either respond directly or we'll set up a Zoom meeting to go through something with afterwards, or we'll say, would it be better for everybody to hear, in which case we'll do an education session on it. So I think, again, we're pretty unique in that, because they've all got our numbers. They know they've all got access to us if we need. Could that go wrong? Hell yes. I was a bit cautious when we put that commitment at the start, but it hasn't, because people haven't abused it. And because we've put the effort in around education sessions and newsletters, we do get people coming to us directly in person, but we don't get huge numbers of them because most of the things have been addressed elsewhere. And if anybody wants to find out more about joining, Alison's email is on the bottom. Alison at Use My Data, or you can go through me as well. That's very easy. So joining is easy. I mentioned one last thing before I want to go on my last slide, which is where I want to involve you, which is National Patient Data Day, our Patient Data Conference, which is planned for 24th of June next year. So great, another conference. This one's a bit different. This is designed entirely by members, entirely by the patients and the public, on topics that they want to see, in formats they'd like to, they prefer. So it won't be just sit down in the back of a room, get some important person lecturing you, go and have a cup of coffee and hear the next person lecturing you. That is not what's going to happen. So it's going to be very interactive on topics and themes they want. So there'll be workshops, there'll be discussion sessions, and a whole range of other things as well. There will also be an exhibition, so we're calling it Data Street, encouraging people when they're there to walk along Data Street and talk to the exhibitors who are people like data controllers, commercial organizations, policymakers, charities, all with a data perspective. So that might be something of interest to you to think about what presence you want to have there as well. We've already got Yorkshire and Humber very interested in being there because it's in Leeds, but this is not just a northern perspective. So you'll hear more about that in the newsletters, and we'll be in touch with you about that shortly. So my last slide was really about opportunities, because when Kevin and I were speaking about this a while ago, when he and I were at a conference elsewhere, we were chatting and said, well, we could help you, you could help us. What could we do? So I said I'd come and do this talk and then pose some questions about, well, I think we could be really useful to you. So for instance, any patients, relatives and carers involved in any of your PPIU work might benefit from being a member. Access to other members, access to our education sessions, access to a wider range of people involved in a wider range of projects to build their expertise and let them be more effective PPI members for you. Your own PPIE teams and colleagues might benefit from this. So we've got lots of PPIE coordinators around the country now, and sometimes they feel a little out of it in terms of what we mean by artificial intelligence. What is it? What is open source? Just 2 examples. So they might actually benefit from some of our education sessions. They'd certainly benefit from being receiving the newsletter of things that are going on in the world. It keeps people, give that a wider perspective rather than just looking at your individual piece of work. I put output teams there. I didn't know how to describe it, but essentially, if you're producing work, producing information, producing research outputs, well, we can be quite useful to help with some of those things as well. Not least, we've got a lot of expertise in the summaries. We've got lots of times junior researchers have come to us and said, I really want to extend my presentation skills, but I'm not very good. So we provided a safe space for them with maybe half a dozen of our members, and the person has come along, done their presentation about their piece of research they've just done, which might be small, could be large, just to give them practice to say, how did that sound? Did it come across? Did you understand it? Did I explain things well in a really safe, supportive session? We did that a few times, and some of the early ones, some of the patients have stayed in touch with the research and have actually joined their research teams as well. So there's a real benefit. Because we've got a large membership, we've got several hundred people now. If you need to find somebody who knows something about X or is interested in a particular topic or a disease area or a theme, we do a finding service. So we'll put something in our newsletter to say, here's an opportunity. If you want to be involved, just contact Kevin, for instance. And I mentioned the critical friend, independent viewpoints. If you've got any tricky issues that you want to involve a group of patients with around data, and you want a critical friend view, you want that independent view, you want a safe space to talk to, again, we can provide that easily for you. We've done that with lots of things right the way up through Department of Health. And then the last bit, how could you help us? Well, first of all, you could ensure your PPI members know about who we are and what we do. Advertisers, see if they're interested. Come to give us a ring, get in touch. Ideally, join them up as members if they're interested in data. Certainly for the data conference, the National Patient Data Day, National Patient Data Day will be an annual thing. So this will be something we can get behind every year. And I imagine this is going to take off after 2025, and it'll be owned and managed much more collectively rather than just use my data. And certainly for the conference, it'll be really good to advertise that and get your thoughts about what you think you might like to see at the conference. And we can put that to the patients and say, does that make sense? And then general support, making sure people are aware of us. If you think we're any good, if you think it makes sense, tell other people it's good, it makes sense. Funding is a constant challenge for us because there is very little funding opportunities to fund something that Use My Data. We've been lucky so far. The reason we're becoming a charity is it might open up some opportunities for us, because we need to continue. We are always overburdened with things we would want to do. Another one is signposting. If you're finding people who have got questions about data, make sure you signpost them to us rather than them finding Med Confidential or somebody else by accident, and a range of other things. And you will have more ideas about how we could help you and how you could help us, hopefully, because that was my last slide. I'll leave my details up there for a second.